Hi. Okay, so what I want to do is really just talk through the textbook that I've put online for you to work through. And what I asked you to do before Easter was to make sure you got the keywords from the red boxes copied down so you know what those keywords mean, and to basically start working your way through answering the questions that are on the book. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of like talk through some of the information in the book. Now, normally in the classroom, I'll be um, asking you questions. We'll be having a class debate. We'll be talking about how things have changed so much, and you would also be giving me your opinions, and there'll be more of a class discussion going on throughout all of this, especially when we're looking at something of relationships and families. As you can imagine, there's going to be lots of differences of opinion. But unfortunately, we don't have any of that. Okay, because this is not interactive, it's literally just going to be me talking. So I'm just going to really go through and really sort of like talk through the different chapters and what are the main things I think need clarifying and just highlight. Okay, so starting off, as you can see, you can go through this in your own pace because I've uploaded this textbook onto Teams so you can work your way through this in your own pace. So we're looking at relationships and families. Okay, so human sexuality, heterosexuality, and homosexual relationships. Now, even since this book has been written, there's been a huge explosion about discussion about gender within society. But for the case of for the exam, they are just mainly going to be looking at heterosexuality and homosexuality. Please don't. I know you know the difference between the two. Don't mistake the differences between the two. Okay. Now, attitudes over the last, I don't know, 20 years or so had changed dramatically. It was, when I was growing up, homosexuality wasn't really seen as something that was discussed. You knew it was there, but it just wasn't something that people talked about. And people who were in the media, who were in films that were gay, either hid their homosexuality or there were terms used like the person's very camp, and it was played upon, but nothing was taken seriously. It was more of a nod and a wink wink kind of thing rather than something that was accepted. So attitudes have changed enormously over the past just few decades. It's gone really, really quickly. So we're going to be looking at, if you look on the sort of like chapter 3 on the page 69, I mean, just it's got the legal timeline of how things have changed. 1885, sexual acts between homosexuals are made illegal. Interesting, they're made illegal in 1885. It wasn't always the case, it was illegal. And then 1967, nearly 80 years later, just over 80 years later, homosexual acts were declared legal for people over 21, except in the armed forces. 94, consent because of the Equality Act, it was reduced to 18. Homosexuals were allowed to serve in the armed forces in 2000. 2000, age of consent for homosexual acts reduced to 16. That's because of the Equality Act. Otherwise, you were discriminating against homosexuals. Then we have literally 3 years later, civil partnerships recognised in law, and then same-sex marriage recognised in 2013. So this is the pace of change since 1994 has been incredible. Within the next 19 years, we've gone from age and consent being lowered to same-sex marriages now being recognised in law, and I think a lot of people now just don't bat an eyelid about it. It's just the way society is. But we need to recognise society has changed, and when society changes really quickly, it does take longer for individuals' own attitudes to change. You can change the law quicker than you can change someone's attitudes. Okay, so quick point about the age of consent. The UK age of consent, I know we talk about this 16 when we have your sex ed lessons. Legally old enough to freely to agree to have sex. The law tries to protect anyone under 16 from exploitation and abuse. Children under 13 are protected by additional specific laws to prevent abuse. Some people think that as long as people freely consent and are over 16, any kind of sexual behaviour is acceptable. But most people, whether religious or non-religious, would consider infidelity, unfaithfulness, to be wrong. So the Christian attitudes really towards sexuality, human sexuality, they are going to be varied. Okay, different Christian denominations are going to have different view. There is not one blanket view about human sexuality across Christianity, and I think a lot of it comes down to what is the purpose of sex. And when it goes down to the Genesis story, the creation story, which hopefully you remember, when it says a man and woman should be united together and increase in number. So clearly you need a man and woman creating babies, creating families, creating communities, and so on for to survive. And all of that makes sense. This is about how to organize your society. So therefore the purpose of sex is to procreate. That's what it's there for. And so therefore any sexual act which does not entail or does not lead or have the possibility to lead to procreation in some Christian churches is going to be seen as wrong. Okay, and so that is why you will have some Christians like the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church being against homosexual sex because it doesn't lead to procreation. Now, it's really clear they're not against homosexuality within their teachings. And in practice, it might be different because people have their prejudices, and because we were all children of God. It's the act of the homosexual sex that is against their teachings because it doesn't lead to procreation. So it's important that we get that the specific detail right. There's nothing in the Bible about specific detail regarding homosexual relationships between women. There's a passage, there are only 6 passages in the Bible that talk about homosexuality, and the 6 are in a negative way. But like I say, nothing about relationships between women at all, which I suppose is going to be a bit of a problem for people who take the Bible literally, isn't it? Now, again, it's really clear, it says textbook there, church teaches that homosexual people are not sinful because of their homosexuality, but they should remain chaste. So there was a famous vicar who is always on, seems to be on TV. Richard, he's the Reverend Richard, and he is homosexual. He was in a band in the 80s that I knew when I was growing up, with someone called Jimmy Somerville, and he led a very extreme homosexual lifestyle beforehand. He converted to Christianity, became a Christian, and then he met another priest who was also gay, and they lived together. And he was saying that yes, they are gay, they live together, they love each other, but they remain chaste. Unfortunately, this year his partner passed away tragically, and when he passed away, some horrible people came out and sent messages to Richard, saying they're glad his partner's died because homosexuality is a sin, is what they were saying. First of all, the church doesn't teach that. It's the homosexual sexual act that is a sin for some Christians. Now, there are other Christians who have a different take on it. As far as they're concerned, is that sex, there's 2 purposes for sex, really. One, yes, is procreation, but the other one is to demonstrate love to your partner. And the Church of England falls into this category of Christianity. And so long as there's consent, so long as you're showing love to your partner, then they don't have a problem with it. It's 2 people who are falling in love who want to express their love sexually. And so for many Christians, that is the take that they have on homosexuality. Because we live in a society now where even heterosexual couples are using contraception to make sure they don't get pregnant. So not every sexual act leads to somebody becoming pregnant anyway, or the possibility of someone becoming pregnant anyway. So we shouldn't be discriminating against homosexuals. Now, it's going to do contrast with other religions, but essentially they're the main They're the main ideas that people have. Now it says one quote there from Leviticus on the side says, "Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable." Leviticus, it's in the Old Testament, and people say, "Well, that's pretty straightforward. That's black and white." One level it is black and white. Okay. First of all, it doesn't say anything about women not having sex with each other, so it's only condemning male homosexuality. Um, so are people who take the Bible literally really saying that female homosexuality is okay, but male homosexuality isn't, if you're going to take a literal reading of it? But that passage also comes within a whole load of teachings of where it says you shouldn't eat certain types of meat, you should only wear clothing made of one material, and a whole load of other stuff that we ignore and Christians ignore, but they've phoned in on that one particular passage to justify what they believe in. Okay, so if you answer the questions on there, like I say, two main ideas about homosexuality. One, the purpose of sex is just to procreate, therefore homosexual sex is wrong. And the other one is we have conception anyway. As long as two people love each other and they're committed to each other, then that's not a problem whatsoever. Okay then.